Good evening, and welcome to On the Frontline, Winning the People's Agenda. I'm Sheridan Aguirre with United We Dream. The Frontline Mass Calls are a space to hear updates and analysis, engage in political education, and get involved in meaningful action. We're so happy that you're here with us tonight, and we'll get started in just a minute. Spanish interpretation is provided on this call, so if you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please select the globe icon if you're on your computer. If you're on your tablet or smartphone, press the More or three dots icon. Then select Language Interpretation and choose Spanish in the pop-up. Buenas noches y bienvenidos al encuentro virtual del Frontline. Mi nombre es Sheridan Aguirre y soy con United We Dream. Estos encuentros virtuales son un espacio para escuchar información y análisis, participar en la educación política y tomar acción. Hay interpretación en español. Si deseas escuchar la interpretación en español, favor de seleccionar el icono del globo en la computadora, o si estás en tableta o teléfono, selecciona donde dice More o los tres puntitos. Después seleccione Interpretación de idiomas y después Español. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Knox from the Working Families Party, who will be leading our call tonight.
Thank you so much, Shetty. We appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to On the Frontline, Winning the People's Agenda. If you're watching on Zoom, drop in the chat and say what's up to us. Let us know where you're joining us from, all right? I'm Jennifer Knox, the National Organizing Director of the Working Families Party, she, her, and I'm calling in from Piscataway in Anacostan land, aka Washington, D.C. And I am just so happy to be here with you all tonight, helping MC this call and talk about some really important issues coming up. For those of you who have been on a Frontline call before, welcome back. We're so glad that you're with us again. And if this is your first time you're joining us, welcome especially to you. You are in the right place. The Frontline is made up of a historic Black-led, multiracial alliance of the Movement for Black Lives, Working Families Party, United We Dream, and the Rising Majority. The Frontline launched in the wake of the 2020 uprisings that flooded the streets with millions of people demanding change, and we knew we wanted to make both an electoral impact, but also a long-term impact. For months, the Frontline has been organizing to protect the vote, fight for racial justice, and elect leaders who prioritize bold policies that provide jobs and care for our communities. And now the Frontline is taking action right now as we head into congressional recess to hold our elected officials accountable to their promises. If you're new to the Frontline, we want you to take a moment right now, break out your cell phone in your hand, and text Frontline to 30403. Go ahead, grab your cell phone and take it out, type in Frontline, just as you see on the screen, to 30403. And that way we can stay connected. We'll let you know about all the ways that you can be involved in this coming spring recess, but also ongoing with us. Before we dive into tonight's call, I want to acknowledge that there is so much that we have been through together. First, I want to express rage, sadness, and just deep anger about the rash of anti-Asian violence that's happening across the country right now. We're sending deep love and solidarity to all communities who are really suffering tonight. Here at the Frontline, we honor the lives that have been taken too soon and affirm our solidarity with so many in the Asian community here who have fought side by side with us in so many recent fights, fighting with us for migrant children to be returned to their families, for workers' rights, and against police violence. Let's make no mistake that this horrific murdering spree that has left 6 Asian women dead in Atlanta is rooted in racism. It reeks of misogyny, and it is underpinned by anti-immigrant rhetoric espoused by Republicans and the right wing in this country. The spike in violence clearly corresponds to that racist rhetoric, these false attacks that are peddled by elected officials from Washington to Georgia, and it builds on years of divestment, dehumanization rooted in white supremacy, and the criminalization of all of our communities. It's on every one of us to speak this truth. Movement for Black Lives, Working Families Party, Rising Majority, United We Dream, we are with you tonight. Our interlocking experiences demand that we do more to protect one another every single day, and we're committed to that fight. to defend and protect our Asian siblings, and to do the work it will take to ensure that we live in a world where we're all safe and free. I also want to acknowledge that we're 1 year out from COVID-19. So many of us remember the last time that we saw family members in person, and especially that pandemic has taken an extreme toll on Black, Brown, Native, and low-income communities that have really been hit the hardest. We honor every single one of those lives, every single one of those nearly more than 500,000 people who have died in this country. And we send our love and support to their loved ones who are grieving here in the USA, but also abroad. The Frontline is hosting a conversation tomorrow about this, about COVID and the impact it's had. It's our very first Clubhouse event, so we hope that you'll join us. That's tomorrow, Thursday, March 18th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the COVID Convo. And I think we're sharing right now the link. You can go ahead and visit that link to get more information. So join us on the Clubhouse, all right? We're picking up a new venue. This is heavy, y'all. It has also been a year since Breonna Taylor was killed by police, and 10 months since George Floyd was killed by the police. And of course, many of us met each other and hit the streets in kind of those uprisings in May and June of last year in defense of Black lives. Thank you to every single person who went out over the last couple of days to honor the life of Breonna Taylor. And we know that her life will not be lost in vain because we are here. We remember her, and we're still in the struggle and still in the fight. 4 months ago, we voted out Trump out of office, and we then went on to end the GOP control of the Senate in the Georgia runoffs. That has represented such a tremendous shift in the balance of power in this country. And I just want each and every one of you to know that we did that. We made that happen. It's been 1 month since the winter storm ripped through the South, and people in Jackson, Mississippi, the blackest city in the USA, are still, when I say still, do not have the water that they need and are dealing with rolling blackouts. So if you're able, please consider donating to help out the people in Jackson, our fam there. You can donate to the Mississippi Winter Storm Rapid Response Fund by going to the link that is on your screen right now. If that weren't enough, y'all, it's been just 1 week since the $1.9 trillion economic stimulus bill was signed into law. This bill contains such critical support for working people, including $1,400 checks to many working families, extensions of unemployment benefits, rent relief, and funding for vaccines in schools. It also includes such a critical piece, the expansion of the child tax credit that will function something like Social Security for kids. Passing this bill was a major victory. Thank you to every single person who made a call to their elected official, who wrote a letter, who maybe even went physically to show up in protest or in support of this bill. We thank you. We know that when we vote, it matters. We know that when we take to the street, it matters. And that when we cast bold vision, it works. Too often, working people feel that it just cannot get better. But what we've seen just now, when we expanded the child tax credit, that we could actually cut childhood poverty in half. It is proof that there are real solutions to wealth inequality. And when we make big, bold demands, we can win real solutions. So I thank y'all for being in the fight. We have made a tremendous step forward. We also know that the minimum wage was not in that bill, and we are going to keep fighting because we know that there are working people for whom getting a $15 minimum wage will be life-changing, and we will fight. We will not settle. We will fight until we win. So let's take a deep breath. Whew, so much has happened, y'all. So much that we've been through. And it's been a real roller coaster. All of these things, both the highs and the low of it have been true. I think it's true that we're holding both grief and rage with us, but we're still here. We're still in the fight together, and we have won so much together. And so we celebrate and mark these victories as we continue on in the struggle. So now I'm going to get ready to introduce some of our wonderful, wonderful talent and just comrades that are here with us tonight. We're going to start by doing a cultural grounding by Diva Mahal, who is just a dope singer who's going to bless us all. And then we're going to discuss this moment that we're in. We're in the midst of the first 100 days. Why we're going to talk about why that's so important and what are some of the legislation that now is up for being passed now that the relief bill has moved. We're going to hear about these kind of key federal policies that are addressing economic justice, racial justice, climate justice, and democracy reform. And we'll discuss how those are interconnected. Specifically, we're going to hear from some amazing movement leaders tonight. We've got Ruth Miller from Native Movement, who will speak on the Thrive agenda. Dr. Amara Enyia from Movement for Black Lives, who will talk to us about the Breathe Act, and Brother Dwight Bullard from Florida Rising, who's going to talk to us about democracy reform. And you will not want to miss a second of it. Before I pass this over to our wonderful singer and grounder tonight, I want to just let you know that there may be, when we call out white supremacy for what it is, sometimes we get some haters. So we know that can be upsetting. It's definitely possible that there may be some trolls on here tonight. If you see something crazy going in the chat, we ask that you take ownership of this space because this is our house. So you drop messages of solidarity in the chat. We will drown that negativity out and it will give our moderators some time to remove those folks. So we appreciate us, keeping this space safe. And I know that we can count on you. So now we've got a dope treat for you. Deva Mahal is an indie R&B singer who was born with blues in her blood. She was raised in Hawaii and discovered her voice in New Zealand. She released her debut album, Run Deep, in 2018, and her new single, Sister, is going to be released later this week. So, Diva, if you would bless us, please.
Hey everybody, it's Deva Mahal here, and I'm really happy to be joining the Working Families Party to celebrate this event, and I will be performing a song that I wrote called Optimist. And it goes like this.
and get back on your feet.
love and think positive. Much love.
Ooh, thank you so much. So needed, so timely. We so appreciate you being here with us, Diva. Now, we've got so much more to do, so let us keep it moving. I'm going to begin to introduce some of our wonderful speakers who are going to talk to us about a variety of issues. We're in a very critical moment where we can move so many things during this spring recess. And we know that everything is on the line for us this year in 2021. Our health, our jobs, our immigration status, our lives are on the line. And we have to fight. We have to fight together. We know that racial capitalism determines so much of our society. It determines who has access to healthcare and who can move across borders, who gets stopped by the police, and whose votes even count. And just as those problems are interconnected, so are the solutions. And here at the Frontline, we believe that these critical fights, racial justice, climate justice, economic justice, and immigrant justice must be tackled together. And that's why we've come together as a united front with M for Biel, Rising Majority, United We Dream, and the Working Families Party, and each and every one of you. And so now we have an opportunity to really demand that during this, what we're calling recovery recess, we demand that Congress go big and go bold, that there be no excuses and no exceptions. We already talked a little bit about the American Rescue Plan that was just signed into law on March 11th. And we know that this was such critical support for people, but we also know that it was not enough. If you know that this was not enough, drop in the chat right here, not enough. All right, because we know we're going to keep on pushing. So Congress has a 2-week recess that's coming up in just a few days at the end of March. And this is historically a very important moment where the public registers its approval or disapproval of the president's agenda, just like the Tea Party did in 2009. So this is our chance to show President Biden and Congress that we want them to continue, that we want them to go big on the recovery. And that means we need everybody across the country to lift their voice with us, to organize and make sure that we are heard. So let's share a little bit about that agenda and what it would look like for us. Absolutely. So I want you to tell us a little bit about what you want to see happen. If you go to menti.com, that's menti.com, use the code 8740-8319 to participate. So take out your phone. And if you go to menti.com, menti.com, you'll type in the code 8740-8319 so that you can participate. I see a couple people joining. We'll give you a few more minutes. And I want you to go ahead and begin to let us know in Menti what recovery would look like for you. In a few words, describe what passing a people's agenda would mean for our communities. If you keep on joining, go ahead to menti.com, menti.com. 8740-8319 is the code you need to participate. Love it. I see many more joining. We'll ask you to go ahead and share with us what passing a people's agenda would mean for our communities. And pretty soon, I think we'll see that come up. I think you can show us the next slide. It'll probably have some of the feedback people have given. Love it. Yeah, I think oh, okay, there we go. Love it. Go ahead and share on your phone. Make sure you're at menti.com, 8740-8319. Love it. I'm seeing the comments come through What are your 3 words that describe what a passing of people's agenda would look like? Love it. I see justice, largest hanging out in the middle. Lord knows we need more of that. Democracy, hope. Absolutely. So many beautiful things on here. This is our vision. I see equity. How about you take us to our next question? It's possible that might be the one. All right, hold these words in your hearts, y'all, throughout this, and I know that we can manifest these things over the next couple weeks in March recess. So let's do a quick overview of some of our top priorities. Awesome. In our recess demands. Awesome. The first one is going to be the Thrive agenda, which we're going to have folks talk about. It's going to be about creating jobs and reviving our economy, addressing climate change and racial injustice. The second one we're going to talk about tonight is the Breathe Act, which is a new vision for public safety and defunding the police. Third, we're going to talk a smidge about immigration justice, although 2 weeks ago, we did a deep dive on this intersecting issue, so we'll be light touches tonight. And then lastly, tonight, we're going to talk about democracy reform and the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the ability to end the filibuster, which are such critical opportunities for us to take advantage of. Awesome. So this congressional recess is a key opportunity to make our voices heard while the members of Congresses are in their home districts, which is late March to early April. So we're going to be taking it to them. If you've already texted the Frontline to 30403, that's the best way to get involved. Go ahead and text it now. You can text Frontline to 30403. And we're going to be holding a recess action training. That's next Wednesday on March 24th. Same time, same place, right here. And you can use the links that are there to sign up for that. And if you want to lead an action for March recess, go ahead and text Frontline to 30403, and it'll allow you to sign up to be one of our coaches, it'll allow you to get a coach who can help you lead an action. And then lastly, you can visit our map using the link that's on the slide, and that'll help you find an action near you for March recess. So with that said, I'm going to let us dive in here. I am so excited to hear more about the Thrive agenda. And we're going to hear right now from Ruth Miller from Native Movement, who has been organizing on this issue and has got something she's really passionate about to share with you tonight.
Yaxlidu everyone, Shvek isench ijit u digi kak shugu yestura, then inakananga shafkun kanash u chayangel nanish ite. Shidiznak Heather Kendall Miller u Lloyd Miller shumkta u stukta u chikanekali kiriki. My English name is Ruth Miller, and my Deni Athabaskan name is Shivak Isen. I'll also share with you my Ashkenazi Jewish name, which is Chut Shlomo de Yisrael. And I am calling in here from my homelands, my ancestral lands of Digay Kak, otherwise known as Anchorage, Alaska. And I'm so proud to be speaking with all of you about the Thrive Agenda. But first, I wasn't anticipating this, but I find that there's something in my heart that I need to share with all of you. Nalchin dach naya naqin kuldat hay Baja aynaya da ilqi naqin kuldat hay. This song is in my Den'ina language. It was composed by our beloved elder, Peter Kalfornsky, who's now passed, and it's called the Potlatch Song of a Lonely Man. And this song came to me after hearing Jennifer Knox's powerful words reminding us of the grief that is weighing on our hearts and the burden that is pushing down on our shoulders. This song is a song about loss. It's a song about our loved ones being taken from us. It's a song about our friends, our relatives being taken from us. But the second verse is a song of celebration, of our loved ones with kindness coming back to us to stand with us again. I wasn't planning on singing, but we can't afford to be shy with our voices. And we can't afford to resist all that this moment has to offer us for action. So today I come to you to talk about community, to talk about the core of that song, the core of that message, that we have to protect one another, that our love for one another has to be so much stronger than our grief of losing each other, than our fear. And so across our Indigenous, our Black, our migrant, our Asian communities, we have to remember the reciprocity that this earth knows, that this earth taught us in our Indigenous communities. So let me take you to our first slide, which is showing a little bit about what's happening here on the ground in Alaska. Here in Alaska, our lands, our waters, our sky, our air, our people, we all remember what it meant to live in reciprocity, what it meant to live in harmony, in justice, in equal relationship with our human and non-human relatives. And that knowledge, that wisdom is alive and well with our people. It thrives in the subsistence foods that we eat, the salmon and the moose, the caribou and the seal. It thrives with the fresh water that we drink. But we also know the pain of loss. We know what it means to have the wisdom that will save our generation today, using the guidance of generations that came before us. But we also feel this impending call to action, because although we're on the front lines of the solutions, we're also on the front lines of the climate crisis here in the Arctic. So when we began introducing the framing of just transition to Alaska, we realized that we needed to make it speak to us. We needed to make it speak to our lands and to our earth and the ancestral knowledge that is buried here in the ground. And so when we learned just transition, we went to our elders. We asked them, what does this mean to you? And what they shared with us was in the Benti Kanaga language of the Loretenena Dene, Kutreshne, which means remembering forward. Our Just Transition Collective began to amass grassroots organizations largely run by matriarchal, Indigenous-led organizing crews, working together to bring to bring our ancestral teachings as well as our visionary path forward together into policy, into industry, into economy, and to challenge our community in Alaska to re-envision what economic success can look like for Alaska. We know Alaska far longer than the time that it has just been an oil colony to the US empire, and we are demanding a return to the truths, the community sustaining life ways that we once lived in. And so when we began, we can go to the next slide now. When we began to mobilize in this way, we were thrilled to begin partnering with the National Green New Deal Network, which we had many members that we already recognized from decades and decades of organizing. Whether it's, on the streets or behind Zoom calls, we saw familiar faces in our siblings that were working from the ground up, representing our frontline communities, our most historically marginalized groups, to ensure that our demands for justice were not just included in the bylines piecemeal in legislation, if at all, but were undergirding the governance of our country, our states, our local and our tribal governments. And so today, when we're on, the foottails of our sister Deva Mahal being appointed as the first Native woman to the president's cabinet, we also know that this is the time to act. This is the time to hold our leadership accountable, to call our leadership into community as their constituents, especially those that are only there thanks to us and our grassroots organizing, thanks to Black women for getting them there. We know that this is the time to ensure that our Indigenous women and our frontline voices are implemented in state management policies. So on the next slide, I can talk to you a little bit about what this looks like, why I'm so excited and geared up, ready to go for the Thrive Agenda. The Thrive Agenda is a bold plan for economic renewal. It is a plan that ensures 15 million jobs, and not just any jobs that are the bare minimum of maybe paying your rent or getting food on the table for your family. We're talking about good jobs, family-sustaining jobs, union jobs. The Thrive Act offers an investment that will renew our climate and care infrastructure in ways that create 15 million good jobs while also cutting pollution, advancing racial justice, and ending the unemployment crisis. And 50% of this investment will go right to frontline communities. Those on the front lines of systemic racism, those on the front lines of the climate crisis, those facing the most severe economic insecurity will be the ones who are uplifted into leadership and the ones who are helped first. They will be the determinants of what an economy looks like. And the Thrive Act ensures that the investments of $1 trillion every year for the next 10 years serves our people first. This also includes support for a care economy and advancing the right to organize, which, in the Indigenous community, we recognize as, watching each other's backs, taking care of one another. The Thrive Agenda incorporates supports to ensure that those engaging in care work and child care work, adult care, elder care are also distinguished as not only crucial members of our society, but are also validated with fair wages, and that they additionally have the right to organize to advance their own interests. So on the next slide, we see the variety of ways that this will be achieved. The Thrive Agenda proposes 8 different planks, which range from investments in union organizing to ecological justice, to agricultural support for farmers of color. Through these 8 planks, we see racial justice, ecological justice, gender justice infused at every turn of these investments. And so I really, really highly recommend that folks go to thriveagenda.com to learn more and to explore these planks in an interactive way. But luckily, you're right on time to jump on the boat, because on the 31st, we will be launching a massive day of action to bring all of these weeds together. You'll remember from the first slide, when we first started talking about just transition in Alaska, we knew that we needed every part of our community. We needed our teachers, we needed our food growers, we needed our elders and our youth, we needed our artists. We also needed our electricians and our oil field workers. We needed everyone to be a part of envisioning what this just transition and what this regenerative economy will mean for our communities. And so on March 31st, you will be witnessing a national day to action to kick off our congressional recess, the moment when we not only have the opportunity, but must take the opportunity to remind our electeds why they are in a position that is meant to serve the people and what we expect of them there. So kicking off the recess, you'll see a series of national events that all bring the Thrive Agenda to a state level, that allow conversation from the state up. In Alaska, we'll be launching a webinar of Alaskanizing the Thrive, and we'll also be creating a zine specifically for tribal leaders, indigenizing the Thrive, and talking to Indian country about what the Thrive Agenda's passage would mean for us and the ways that it would help our people. And so on the next slide, please. This is the last message that I'll leave you with, that the Thrive Agenda means a Green New Deal that includes everyone. This is our next best chance to see justice be infused in every facet of our healing process. As we heal from the grief that's weighing on our hearts, that's pushing down on our shoulders, we have the opportunity to make sure that this is an opportunity that will be transformative, that this won't just be recovery, but it will be meaningful change that gives my descendants something to look forward to, that gives my ancestors something to be proud of. So I'll end as I usually do, with words from my community. We are working as one. Thank you so much to the host for giving us the opportunity to speak here with you. And we are so, so proud to stand in solidarity and be in action in this moment with each of you. Thank you so much.
Singing and lifting your voice in this space. We appreciate you bringing the words of your ancestral language into this space with us. You humble us and you honor us. And thank you for reminding us to remember forward our ancestral teachings. We have to remember forward. We have to push and struggle. There will be people who said, you just got something. You're good. That's enough. They will say that $1 trillion every year for the next 3 years invested in our communities is too much. And what will we tell them? That it is not enough. And we will keep fighting. If you know that we got to keep pushing right now, drop in the chat right now, keep pushing. And let us know that you'll be there on the launch day for the Thrive Agenda, March 31st. You can hit us up, check out the map at frontline.fyi/recovery, and it's got tons of actions that you can show up to. I want to make sure your voice is heard. Every single person needs to be heard. If you're going to make your voice heard during the spring recess, put in the chat, I will be there. Next, we're going to hear from another talented sister. Dr. Amara Enyia is going to talk to us about the Breathe Act, which is another piece of policy that we can be lifting up during this spring recess that, again, intersects in our lives in so many ways. All these issues are important, and we don't have the luxury of fighting for one thing at a time. We're going to have to push for it all, and when we push together, we know we'll be successful. Dr. Enyia.
For the space, I also want to honor Ruth for such a powerful message of unity and of solidarity, and much needed. I also want to express my solidarity and the movement for Black Lives, solidarity with our siblings and our comrades in the Asian and Asian American community. And it's important that we really join together in this time. We know that our fights, that we have so much in common, that we have the strength and the resilience within ourselves, but that we're not in this alone. And so I wanted to express that solidarity in this space. Also to talk through just some of the vision that we have, the vision that informs the work, that there is a lot that's heavy and it's weighing on all of us, but there's also a lot to be excited about and a lot for us to look forward to as we persist, as Jay Knox said, as we keep pushing. And so that, for me, is really grounding the work that we're doing with the Movement for Black Lives and the Breathe Act, which is it's legislation that meets the demands of this moment. And so we are very much aware last year, millions upon millions of people took to the streets over the summer in uprisings in cities across the country and cities around the world. And they gathered to demand justice, to demand accountability, not just though to say what they were against, but because there's a vision of the society that we deserve. And so they let their voices be heard. And so while the world seemed to wake up to the reality of what those of us who've been on the front lines, grassroots organizers and movement folks have been saying for generations, we know that this did not start in 2020 with the killing of George Floyd. We know that this has been a fight that spans decades, it spans generations, not just in the United States, but around the world, where we are fighting state-sanctioned killings. We're fighting police that have not been accountable. We are fighting a system that has devastated our communities for far too long in the loss of lives, in the loss of resources, and has really stripped our communities of the things that we know that we deserve. And that, out of that is how the Breathe Act emerged. And it's important to put it in context because for those who perhaps are not as involved, you would think that this all started in 2020 and it didn't. We can recall in previous years the death of Mike Brown, the death of Trayvon Martin. We're at the 1 year mark when we think about Breonna Taylor in Chicago, Rekia Boyd. The list of names goes on and on. And so we have a responsibility to the lives that have been taken from us, to our communities, to ourselves and to each other, to rise to what this moment demands. Even though we have this change in administration, we know that this is not the time for us to sit back. This is not the time for us to accept anything that we get because we have a new administration. Quite the contrary. It's actually a time for us to be bold and for us to express our vision of the society that we deserve. And that is what the Breathe Act does. It actually takes a framework that the Movement for Black Lives uses in our work, the Invest, Divest framework. And basically that means that we are all about investing in our communities, that we know the things that create strong individuals, strong communities, strong families. It's investing in resources and education, economically investing in our communities, housing, mental health care, all of the resources that our people need to thrive. We require and we demand the investments that will get us to where we want to go. At the same time, though, we know that we have to divest from the carceral state. We know that the United States spends billions upon billions of dollars in so-called defense. We also know that the United States spends billions and billions of dollars in the so-called criminal justice system, expanding policing in prisons, and in endeavors like the war on drugs that we know lead to and led to mass incarceration. So we demand and we call for divestment from the carceral state. That means that we do not support measures that that fund police, prisons, any institution along those lines. And so that framework is very important for the work of the Movement for Black Lives, and it characterizes the BREATHE Act, which proposes a number of investments in our communities and also proposes measures that divest from the carceral state. And why is this important? It's important because we know, for example, that there are those who languish in jail simply because they don't have the ability to pay. They can't bond out. Those of us who've worked in the space know we have stories of colleagues, of friends, of family members who, when they were arrested and ended up being in jail just because they weren't able to pay. And essentially it criminalizes being poor, it criminalizes being low income, and it is a fundamentally unjust system. And so the BREATHE Act addresses that. We call for ending qualified immunity for all government actors, not just police officers, but for all government actors. We call for not investing in expanding police training, military equipment that's been in a lot of legislation that's come out. We are staunchly against that because, again, we cannot keep putting resources and funding into the carceral state when our communities need that funding. So the BREATHE Act is about our vision. It says, this is what we want, this is what we demand, and this is what we know will help us to build our own thriving communities. And so the Movement for Black Lives has launched this effort in conjunction with many organizations that have partnered with us, that have helped us to amplify this work around the country from last year up until now. We have made sure that this is top of mind and at the top of the new administration's agenda, and we know that we cannot settle. So we have had some successes in Illinois. I definitely want to lift up the hard work by an amazing coalition of organizations on ground in Illinois that got this legislation passed this year in January. It is the most comprehensive criminal justice reform legislation in the state's history. It ended cash bail completely. It ended prison gerrymandering. So when we talk about voter access and those who are in prison not being able to vote, it ended prison gerrymandering. There are so many components that we were able to win because we did not relent, because we did not accept that we were just gonna be satisfied with the legislation that had been put forth initially. We actually said, no, we have something better and we'll work with you to make sure that it gets done. So we had that victory in Illinois, and our plan is really to replicate that in other states. I know we have folks in New York working on BREATHE and other places around the country to push this at the state level. At the national level, again, we're engaged with the administration. The latest thing that's online that I want to put top of mind for all of you is right now this push for the Justice and Policing Act. And the Movement for Black Lives has come out in opposition to the Justice and Policing Act, which was put on the table a couple of weeks ago. We know that the Justice and Policing Act does not go far enough. We know that it includes provisions that are investing in prisons and investing in police. They did not, the level of engagement of the organizations on ground to get that feedback did not happen, in spite of everything that occurred last year, in spite of the millions of us that were out in the streets last year, and in spite of us making clear that what we needed in this moment goes beyond the typical reforms that have been proposed in years past. And so we're coming out in opposition to Justice and Policing, the Justice and Policing Act, but we've put a lot of information on breatheact.org, which is the Movement for Black Lives site that houses all of the Breathe materials. And we have partnership letters, we have toolkits that will be available to those who are interested in helping us to spread the word. Because overall, we can't settle. And while we may, there's the danger of being sort of lulled into complacency and saying, well, we got this done. I mean, it's a start, but we're tired of the it's a start. We're tired of this is good enough for right now. Hold off, just wait. And we're saying that we actually have to push aggressively for what we know is in the best interest of our community. And that's why we're doing the Breathe Act now. That's why we're mobilizing folks around the country to stand with M4BL, to stand with the many organizations who have partnered with us, who are amplifying the message alongside us. And it's why we're not relenting, why we are not willing to settle for just the basics of what we can get from this administration. We're saying that this is a time to be bold, and this is a time to really put what we demand on the table and to be unequivocal in making those demands clear, because we represent not just ourselves, but the communities that we come from. And there are people that are relying on us to do this work. So that's where we are. That's the status of the Breathe Act. That's, we're really wanting to amplify this message, and we want to really push it aggressively across the country. And we're hoping that folks on the call, folks on the front lines, will join us in this work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Amara. We appreciate your words. If you know that the Justice and Policing Bill falls short and that what we really need is the Breathe Act, I want you to drop in the chat who you will push for the Breathe Act for. Are you pushing in honor of Breonna Taylor? Are you pushing in honor of George Floyd? Are you pushing in honor of Eric Garner, who this act was named after? What about Skylar Heath? What about Ahmaud Arbery? We know we've got to keep pushing. Let us know who you're pushing for. We know it's been too many years of this. There are too many names, and we must breathe. So we are going to push and persist and get that. I think the doctor taught us really the intersections of this. She said that too often they divest from our communities, and we're going to push for further investment in part through Thrive, but then they criminalize our communities for being poor, right? And we are going to demand that they stop over policing our communities. And very often after they over police our community, then they take away our votes. And so we see the ways that all of these issues are intersecting, and we're going to push back in full force against all of them. Next, we have Dwight Bullard from Florida Rising, who's going to talk to us about structural democracy forms and reform and what are the critical opportunities that are available to us right now. There was a recent New York Times article that said there is no more opportune moment to make structural change in our democracy than right now. Mr. Bullard.
Thank you, Jennifer, and greetings, family. I'm so touched and amazed at the dynamic group of individuals that have been amassed on tonight's call, but I'd be remiss if I did not recognize the fact that it is Women's History Month and that I'm honored to be in the presence of such dynamic women that you've heard speak tonight. I come from the great city of Miami, Seminole Miccosukee land, that in 1896, by an order of a charter, required 44% of the participants in that charter to be Black men, but then had their rights immediately stripped after that charter was signed, thus granting them no rights, no access to land, no access to privilege. I say that to say because oftentimes people are under the misconception that Miami is all about sun and fun, but instead, I want to remind you that Miami is a southern city like any southern city. I say that because it should come as no surprise to anyone that areas that were once the Confederacy have been in the business of undermining the freedom of people of color since 1619. Since the very beginning of the so-called United States, we've had, you know, so-called noble white men who had the audacity, right, to use free labor, to use exploitation and violence, and to use the mechanisms of control to keep people like myself and my ancestors suppressed. I say that because when we talk about the notion of democracy reform, we have to root ourselves in the idea that a certain person by the name of Jim Crow has been a continuous presence, especially in the South, since that time. Jim Crow has given rise to his even more nefarious great great grandson, James Crow Esquire. Because right now, these individuals are using the legal system to suppress the votes of men, women, incarcerated, formerly incarcerated individuals, and returning citizens, folks that are seeking uh, refuge in this country. And so I want to recognize and honor those folks. I also want to recognize, because it is Women's History Month, the dynamic uh, forces that women have been in mobilizing the South to fight for their rights. I want to honor folks like Fannie Lou Hamer and Rosa Parks, Daisy Bates and Ella Jo Baker, because those individuals have given rise to dynamic organizers who continue to do the work in the South. Folks like Breonna Brown and Michelle Tremillo, Andrea Mercado and Stephanie Porte, Rukia Lumumba, DeWanna Thompson, Latasha Brown, Stacey Abrams, Inse Ufat, Mary Hooks and Valencia Gunder, who are doing the great work of those dynamic women to continue to hold systems accountable and ultimately bring the liberation that our folks deserve. So without further ado, let's talk about what we're going to do to claim victory. Can I get the slide? When we think about the notion of rights, we have to understand that it's important for us to ground ourselves in the fact that we have a fight amongst ourselves. As I mentioned before, this is nothing new. The idea that the Voting Rights Act of 1965 had to be renewed continuously and then was basically summarily dismissed many components of it, especially Article 5 or Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court in 2013, lets us know that we have work to do. But there is opportunities, despite all the suppressive tactics that are happening in places like Georgia and Mississippi and Florida. You know, we're dealing with our own battle here in the state of Florida as they try to get rid of drop boxes and mail-in voting options that were so important in the outcomes of the 2020 election. We see in Georgia similar tactics happening, and that's why we're calling on the federal government to take action through a couple of different pieces of legislation. Next slide. The For the People Act, HR 1, also is known as S1 in the Senate, hopes to achieve the national expansion of voting rights, right? We want to make sure that, again, individuals who are paying taxes, who are seeking citizenship, those individuals that are returning citizens, and moreover, those individuals that are currently under the carceral system should have the right to vote. And the For the People Act creates a pathway for that to happen. It would also override state laws that restrict and undermine voting rights. Next slide. The For the People Act also hopes to empower folks to pursue automatic voter registration, early voting, and absentee voting. It would prevent states from illegally purging names off of voter rolls. It would also help to prevent partisan gerrymandering and create nonpartisan pathways to make sure that these lines and that folks are properly represented and understand that small d democracy is for the people and by the people and not about the politicians. It also restores voting rights for those who are formerly incarcerated, our returning citizen brothers and sisters. Next slide. The For the People Act also hopes to empower many of us through campaign finance reform. We've all heard about the nefarious nature of Citizens United and the dark money and corporations that are basically running ramshot over our government. The For the People Act would return power back to the citizenry by establishing a means of public financing and force companies and individuals to disclose where this dark money is coming from so that we can keep account of the individuals who are trying to rob our government and are, by default, us blind. Next slide. Secondarily, we want to honor the legacy of John Lewis, an amazing human being, an amazing freedom fighter who we lost, unfortunately, in 2020. And in his honor, we want to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would restore those key provisions I mentioned from the 1965 Voting Rights Act that was gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013. Protections that would make states, again, those former Confederate states that seem to continue to find new and problematic ways to suppress votes of Black and Brown people and hold them accountable. Next slide. John Lewis, we know, was that freedom fighter, and as he used to oftentimes say, spilled a little blood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge back in 1964. And so, with that, we look to honor his legacy again with this action, and we want Congress to pass this bill. Next slide. It would reinstate and expand federal oversight to prevent racial discrimination by states within their voting laws. In other words, all the things that they are trying to do right now could be critically overturned if the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act were to pass through Congress this year. Next slide. The last thing that I want to talk about a little bit is the filibuster. The filibuster is a very problematic rule. And I want to say rule, and I emphasize that because it's not a law. There's nothing in the Constitution, there is nothing that requires the US Senate to use the filibuster. Yet they've continuously leaned on this notion that they must have 60 votes in order to pass legislation through the Senate without it being compromised or undermined. What I want to remind folks is that despite the so-called presence of the filibuster, we saw Congress under the administration of Donald Trump pass problematic pieces of legislation after pieces of legislation, take action without the use of this notion of the filibuster. I say that because it is an unnecessary and racist tool rooted in white supremacy and rooted in power and control of what it has been traditionally and continues to be a very, very white male dominated United States Senate. So we're calling on the US Senate to end the use of the filibuster, change their rules, and govern by what we all know to be a simple majority. We understand the notion of the power of the vote. We understand the notion of who controls the Senate. But I do want folks to understand that regardless of their party affiliation, both parties have used the filibuster to undermine the progression and thus the liberation of BIPOC people around this country. Next slide. Oh, that is my last slide, I believe. And so, I'm sorry. The filibuster, as I pointed out, is not in the Constitution. It was used in the 50s and 60s by Republicans and Democrats to uphold white supremacy and prevent civil rights legislation from passing. Next slide. This lets you know the lack of diversity. These were the kinds of senators who would use the filibuster again to undermine the progression of the growing population of people of color in this country. And that is why we must work tirelessly as a collective community to require them to end the filibuster. Next slide. Ted Cruz, most well known for using the filibuster for 21 straight hours to try and undermine our health care. Next slide. We can take action during congressional recess by texting Frontline to 30403. Again, it requires the collective group. And I want to leave you with a simple quote from Marion Wright Edelman, another dynamic Southern organizer who created Freedom Schools, simply saying that service is the rent we pay for being. And so we all have a responsibility to serve. Thank you. Back to you, Jennifer.
For blessing us with that word. I want to thank you, Dwight, and each and every one of our talented teachers that really just dropped knowledge on us tonight. Drop in the chat a thank you to Ruth Miller, Dr. Amara Enyia, and Dwight Bullard for their skillful teaching about what are the political opportunities available to us in this moment. We know that now is the time that we will not let up. We must not settle, and we must keep pushing. I want to do a brief update before we close on some of our immigration priorities, which we did a deep dive on 2 weeks ago. Tomorrow, the Dream and Promise Act and the Farm Workforce Modernization Act are going to be coming up for votes in the House of Representatives. We're confident, that we have a strong majority in the House. We're confident they're going to pass there. But when they pass the House, we're asking each and every one of you to call your senators and tell them to bring those bills to the Senate floor for a vote and pass them immediately. Immigrants need permanent protections now. Let us fight on all fronts right now, y'all. All hands on deck. I want to wrap up by reminding you just some of the opportunities there are for you to engage. Tomorrow is going to be Frontline's COVID Convo on Clubhouse. That's tomorrow, March 18th at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can join us then. Also, we ask you to text Frontline to 30403. This is going to give you the link to the map so that you can participate in congressional recess actions. And also next week, make sure you join us for our congressional recess action training. But really, really, we need every single person to lift their voice during this spring recess that's going to be kicking up, just at the end of this month. So if you are going to make your voice heard during spring recess, I want you to drop in the chat. I will be there. All right. Let us know that you're going to be there. Reach out to your family and friends, y'all. Make sure that our elected officials are greeted when they come home with a thank you for passing the really critical relief bill, but also reminder that your job is not done yet. We are suffering on all fronts, and we will accept nothing less than bold, transformative change and vision. I'll see you all again soon. Thank you so much for joining us. We are on the path. We know we can win all of our freedom dreams. Thank you and good night.